Hello everyone and welcome to Mission 3 of the Community Builder Journey in Blockvocates. And today we're going to look at how you can understand what the different kinds of communities look like, and we'll also look at different tools you can use to start getting into these communities and working on your community builder journey. Right, so I think it'll be pretty clear by now how important communities are to Web3. Throughout the last book in Mission 2, Read, Write, Own, we completely saw how communities are the whole reason of blockchain, right? Read, write, own. We want to give ownership to these communities. That's the whole objective of Web3. So it's pretty clear why communities are so important. And now let's look at what the different kinds of Web3 communities are. So I'll try to categorize them in three types. So the first is project-based or protocol-based communities, right? So these are protocols or projects like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Polygon, Solana. All of these have their own communities, and if you want a helpful analogy to think about it, you could think of them as nations in a way, right? Like USA, India, America. So nations in blockchain are basically these protocol or these project communities, right? Like Bitcoin and Ethereum. You'll find a lot of people sort of finding this allegiance to nations and feeling like they are part of this Polygon nation or this Solana nation. So it's kind of like countries of blockchain, these project-based communities. There are also protocols, like for example Uniswap, which is a DEX. Some of these projects and products have their own communities. They basically run these projects, right? They vote on proposals, they decide the future of what happens in these projects. And then there are also NFT collections, which are also types of projects, right? So you've heard of Bored Ape Yacht Club, maybe there's CryptoPunks. So these are all just communities that are formed on a basis of that art or through those NFTs, and they come together and they decide what their purpose are. Right? So this is one first sort of categorization of communities called project-based communities. And let's look at the second type of community now, right? So this could be purpose-driven communities. That's what I would like to call it. They are designed for a specific purpose, right? So there's no particular project or anything or a product that they're building. This is just a group of people. One great example is DAOs, something we've heard a lot, decentralized autonomous organizations. So there are DAOs for so many different purposes, right? Like there was a DAO to buy the US Constitution at one point. There's a DAO to free Ross DAO. And there's also DAOs for a lot of social impact initiatives, public goods, cleaning up beaches, funding the commons, and a lot of education communities too that are formed based on these DAOs, right? So these are all united by a purpose for some vision that they have. And the third categorization could be interest-based groups, right? So this is based on what you are contributing or what you are doing in Web3. So a great example is there are trader groups where people share alpha and share insights and form groups to try and trade. There are developer communities where people learn together in groups. And example like Blockvocates, we are also a community, right? We are trying to learn together based on our interests. So those three broad categorizations of the types of communities you can expect: project-based communities, and so the protocols and products, and they are tied to a very specific vision or a very specific product. The second is purpose-driven communities, where they're tied to a purpose or a vision, and the third is just united by interest, right? Now let's understand what the platforms are, right? So we went through a bit of the platforms in the first mission actually. Twitter is the biggest sort of community where you can find crypto, but there are other Web3 social media like Lens Protocol, Farcaster, where you can find these communities, right? And you'll find particular communities for particular purposes. Some of the bigger projects that have bigger communities use tools like Discord, Telegram. That's where the entire community gathers. And so for instance, Polygon might have a huge community on Telegram, on Discord. and you'll find a lot of resources, a lot of information, a lot of the alpha, a lot of things that not many others know just by being in these communities. And even for roles, even for jobs in Web3, most of the teams hire directly from their communities, right? So this is how community builder roles typically work in Web3 is you really go to the community, find something you're aligned with, show your interest, make yourself visible, right? And most often than not, these projects, these protocols, they really value their community members, they reward their community members with airdrops, with NFTs, and even when they hire for the actual product or the project, they typically prefer people who have already been in the community. Right? So that's the real importance of being in these Discord groups, in these Telegram groups, posting regularly on Lens and social, making sure whatever the community it is that you've identified, right? Making sure you're visible there and accessible there. And the third kind of tool that we should understand and look at is governance platforms. So, for example, there's something like Snapshot, there's Tally and Aragon too. But this is where the community basically makes proposals and decides what goes next or what happens next in this product or what should our community do as a group. And they typically vote using tokens. That's why they're called governance tokens. Another interesting tool to check out are also token gated platforms. So this can be helpful when you start building your own communities, and examples are Unlock Protocol, Collabland. These essentially let you token gate a community, right? So you can enter this community only if you have a certain number of tokens or if you have a certain number of NFTs, and these tools let you sort of token gate your community. There are also Web3 native content platforms where, for example, Medium is the Web2 blog publishing service, right? But there's Mirror, which lets you publish blogs to a Web3 audience. Lens Protocol again has a lot of apps in their ecosystems. Orb is another example, which has clubs for different specific communities, right? And just a quick understanding is important of what's the difference between Web3 and Web2 communities, right? So the huge and the biggest difference is ownership, like we had spoken about in the book. Web3 communities have ownership from day one. They have access, they have say over what this company is going to do next. It doesn't work like that with Web2 companies, right? Community is seen more as someone to market to, someone to extract revenue from. They're not really given too much say over the future of the company or decisions that the company takes, right? So ownership and incentives, there's a lot more incentives for the community to be involved, and this goes for the other side too, right? Projects really take care of their community. That's how you can tell it's a good Web3 project. And another important thing is also composability, where you're free to own your data, right? Like you are not locked to one particular product or one particular project. If any company is locking you in as a community or not letting you own your data, that's a red flag. That's not a proper Web3 community. So we'll dive into 2-3 successful Web3 community stories now that I've seen in my journey and see what made them successful. So let's dive into some case studies of communities from each of those 3 categories that I mentioned earlier, and learn from some of their best work and get some ideas from how we can build communities for ourselves. Right? So the first type of community that I spoke about was the project or the protocol community, right? And a great example of protocol community or a project community are gaming communities, right? So Axie Infinity is one such game which started as a gaming project and really grew all around the world, right? It had millions of users. There was massive adoption, especially in countries like Philippines. It had a great play to earn model that created economic opportunities for people, right? This was a job, it saved lives, put food on the plate, and they had tournaments, events. It was fun, but you could make a livelihood too. So they built a really great community. They did suffer a bit by the hack from Lazarus, but they've recovered and They have their own Ronin chain now, and it seems to be going strong. So that's a great example of a community that started as a NFT project, and now they have their own blockchain. Another example is a personal story, like Polygon. We were Matic before. Our community started very small, right? We had 50 really die-hard supporters of Polygon, and now it's grown to millions of people all over the world. So Polygon really did a great job when it came to community building, especially in these Asia regions. Polygon, Matic back then, we were present at every hackathon, really listening to the community. Everything was driven by the community and what they wanted, and it's a huge reason for the success they are at now. Aavegotchi is another interesting example, which was one of the first dApps to launch on Polygon actually. They have not raised any money from venture capital. It's completely funded by the community for different aspects of the game, right? So they sold the gotchis, which are the character that you can play, to the community, and that's how they raise money to build the next aspects of the game. And the community has full control over the game. They are voting over the mechanics, what needs to happen next. So this is like a really great example of how you can build a product or a project and really involve your community, make them feel like it is theirs. And the last example from this product or project category, I would say, is Super Team, which is the community of Solana all throughout the world. I think it started in India, but now there's Super Team in UAE, in India, Germany, and it's really a collection of great people who educate new learners about the Solana ecosystem and actually get them opportunities, jobs. For there's kids from college, from university, different backgrounds, right? So Super Team does a great job at building communities, educating people, and actually helping them with opportunities. Now let's look at purpose-driven communities. These can be DAOs, and a great example of a purpose-driven community that I can think of is Gitcoin, which is really innovated with this new funding model called quadratic funding, where projects, or especially impact initiatives and public source, public goods, open source public goods, are able to raise funding in a much more innovative way that it sort of gives you a matching pool of higher rewards depending on the more people that donate to your project or support your project. Right? So very innovative mechanisms for funding new ideas and grants for social impact initiatives. Another great example I want to talk about from this purpose-driven community is Funding the Commons. This was started by Protocol Labs. So, they have been doing amazing work. They're the team behind innovations like Filecoin. And what Funding the Commons does is basically accelerating and supporting the development of blockchain-based infrastructure for public goods funding. Right? So they have a very interesting events. There's builder residencies, hackathons, and a lot of innovative ideas where we're trying to prioritize common goods through this technology of blockchain. It's really amazing people designing some giga-brain systems over there. And finally, let's look at the third kind of categories, right? So that is the educational communities where you're learning or you're growing based on a particular interest, right? So some great examples are even conferences, right? There's a lot of crypto conferences that happen around the world. One particular example is ETH Denver, which happens February, March every year in Denver, and there's so much education that happens over there. People come from all over the world. It's such a great way to learn. I have personally known so many people who have just attended the conference for the first time as a newbie, and they've ended up getting jobs after the conference, right? So it's a great way to meet fellow-minded people interested in blockchain and learn what this whole space is about. Another great example is Super Team, which is the educational community of Solana. And I would say they started in India, I believe, but they're in Germany, UAE now, and they do a great job of really educating new members into the Solana ecosystem. supporting them with opportunities, resources, and actually getting them jobs at the end of the day, with a lot of bounties also, that small projects that they can complete to even learn and earn at the same time, right? And finally, I think shout out to LearnWeb3.io, which is a very well designed structure for developers, especially if you're looking to learn development, find a community around that. LearnWeb3.io has some great resources. And yeah, so that was our case studies into these really amazing projects. And now this is your exercise to complete mission 3. What you have to do is identify one community that you vibe with, that you enjoy with in this blockchain space, right? It could be existing huge communities like Polygon, Solana, Ethereum. You could join those large, huge communities. You'll find these groups on Telegram, Discord, and even within these large communities, you'll find subgroups. For example, Polygon has Polygon guilds around different places in the world. Solana has super team groups. Ethereum also has different communities. So that's one option for you. Or you can also look at new products, new protocols, new projects. Go to Twitter, check out what's happening, right? Try to find what communities excite you the most. Think about your dreams and your visions too, and identify one such community. Get into this community, introduce yourself, right? Do some research about the product, tell them who you are, tell them your story, and tell them what you like about the project. Try to contribute and help in whatever small way, right? Even if you make like a fun meme and post it in there, that's supportive to the team and they will appreciate it, right? So it's up to you to decide what you want to do, but the main objective, the main task is to get into these communities, get into one such community, and talk to these people, identify them, and do something for them, basically, and contribute to them in some small way. And share this on Twitter at the end of it, on all your Web3 social media using them. And that's the completion of your third mission. So that was it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and all the best with Mission 3.